Welcome to the Better Things Ahead podcast. This is where we take a look at life's journeys and discover how we can pass our information that we've learned on to the next generation. This week for Better Things Ahead, we have a special guest, Micah Estes. And as always, I'm joined with Michael Estes, his dad. This week, we're going to be looking at some questions brought in by Micah. And these are questions that are maybe commonly asked by teenagers, and kind of use it as an opportunity for us to answer some of those, or at least make an attempt at answering some of those. So, Micah, thanks for joining us. And this is actually your second time on the podcast.
Second time.
Yep. So we had you back several weeks ago, maybe I guess at this point, a few months ago, whenever you talked through SLU. So great to have you back.
I think it was the last day of summer.
Okay.
Pretty sure.
Yeah. So that's been a while.
Yeah.
So very cool. Well, thank you for coming in, and while we're here, let's just jump into it, because
All right.
you came in prepared.
So the first one that I have, I feel like it's a common thing for everybody to overthink maybe, but I feel like teenagers with the less experience that we have, and like maybe, I don't know, I feel like we tend to overthink a little bit more just about everything. Like it could be school, sports, church, relationships, friend groups, all of that. What is your best advice for overthinkers and like how they can handle that?
It's a good question. You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Well, first, the question that I would have, I think, for you, Matt, is do you identify as an overthinker, or do you think that you're a type of person that like tends to, the word that I would use is ruminate on things, like you just think about them over and over and over again?
So for me, I would say it depends. For me, like I would say yes, I'm an overthinker, where I like to kind of think through. I like to know things, I like to know the details, know kind of what's going on. I like to have a plan, all those kinds of things. So in that sense, yes. On the other side of things, as far as dwelling on them and getting hung up on them, that's not me. Because once I think through it and process through it, I'm done. I can move on to the next thing and kind of overthink and kind of process through that.
Yeah.
So I kind of, am more in one way than the other.
Yeah. Well, the reason I ask is because I have a tendency not to be an overthinker anymore. I probably did that more when I was younger. And I think I have changed in the sense, maybe it's just like you start to get to a certain age and you just like are, what's the point in overthinking this anymore? Like, just make a decision and do something. I read a really good memoir not long ago, Jeremy Renner's memoir, and I can't remember my last breath or my next breath or something like that is the name of the memoir. But in it, he has this whole section about, like, he talked about the fact that you get to a point in life and you just got to make decisions. You just got to do it and trust that you've done the best that you can to prepare. You've done everything that you can on your part to be ready to make that decision, and just make the decision and be okay with that. And so my advice, I think, to a younger person is, there are a couple things that you can do to help you make decisions and to not overthink. One is just to be prepared as best you can be. So like get information, think through the possibilities, but like when it's time to just make a decision, make the decision and don't regret. Don't spend a lot of time wishing you had made different decisions. The honest truth is, I think part of the reason we get hung up on overthinking is that we have a tendency to think that we're going to ruin our life, especially if, as a believer, you're like, what's God's will for my life and all this stuff. And I think if you can simplify it as much as possible and say, look, God's will for me is two things: to love the Lord my God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love my neighbor as myself. If I can do those two things with the decision that I'm making, then it's not such a big deal. So the one that my seniors would always get hung up on when I was teaching was, where should I go to college? Where does God want me to go to college? And it was just like, can you love your neighbor and can you love God at this college? And if the answer is yes at multiple colleges, just pick one. Like, pick the one that has your major, pick the one that, is going to be the best fit for you, whatever. And don't stress about that at that point. There's no point, because the truth of the matter is God's will for you is way simpler than trying to pick the exact right college or whatever. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I do think as you get older, the experience piece helps you build that confidence, right? As you mature in age and as you get to a certain point, you start looking back on decisions and looking back on life choices and things like that. You realize that, maybe some choices weren't the best, or some decisions weren't the best that you may have got hung up and kind of dealt with, but you've learned from it and you realize it didn't ruin your life, I can look back on plenty of decisions that I've had, and some of them I'm like, yeah, okay, that was a good decision. Some of them I'm like, yeah, it was a bad decision, or some of them I'm like, I don't know, like it didn't really have an impact. And so I do agree with going into it with that confidence, and that's where as I shared at the beginning, my piece that I like to overthink is on the front end, because I want to be prepared and I can work through it and I can make those decisions, and I can get to a point, I eventually get to that point of having the confidence of, this is my decision I'm making, and I can move on. And then I can look at the next thing, and then it may work out, it may not, but at least I knew I prepared and got myself to that point. So I agree with that, going into it with everything you got, and then knowing when it's enough to be able to say, this is the end point. And so I think for me, that's kind of the overthinking piece, is knowing when to stop and recognizing I've given it everything I got. I'm satisfied with that. If someone were to ask me, is this the best you could do coming to this decision or whatever it might be, and I can say yes, then I know it's time to move on. And regardless of the outcome, I'm going to be satisfied with that.
Yeah. And one other thing I'd add, Micah, you have one of these people in your life, maybe a couple, but have specifically for guys, older men in your life that have wisdom and have lived through growing as a believer and making decisions, that sort of thing, that you can talk to, that you can bounce ideas off of, because you may lack that experience, but they have it. And if you have trusted people in your life that you can reach out to, those are the people that can help you make those sorts of decisions without overthinking. But if you don't have those people, find those relationships. That would be the first step, is find those relationships. It may be your student pastor. It may be a guy in your church. For you, it's Dave Thomas. And you know that you could reach out to him at any point. You develop that relationship on a mission trip. And so seek out those relationships, and that'll help a bunch with overthinking.
All right. Well, I would say probably my worst trait is I tend to dwell on things a little bit, so that is why I threw that question in there. I think I'm slowly getting better at it, so I'm glad about that. But we can go to number 2. So I would say there's been a lot of new studies coming out about how, like, this new generation, this younger generation is, like, getting more hyped up for Jesus and all that, and getting more excited about it. So in your opinion, what are the best ways to continue to grow in your faith if you are a new and young believer?
Yeah, great question. Want to start?
Sure. So there's a couple of things. I think the most important thing, and this is going to go back to the end of my answer before, is find an older believer and have a relationship with them that'll look like them being willing to talk to you on a regular basis about your faith, hold you accountable. And accountability is a scary word, but I think a lot of times we think of it as a negative thing. Why haven't you done this? Why did you fail in this area? Whatever. That's not really what accountability is supposed to be. Accountability is like, I'm checking in on you. Are you actually actively seeking to grow in your faith? Are you actively reading your Bible? Are you praying on a regular basis? What does your prayer life look like? And then the other part of those relationships is those people also teach you how they've done it too. So, like, this is how I read my Bible. This is the plan that I have in place. This is what I try to do on a regular basis. This is how I pray. This is how I handle certain situations when it comes to being a believer. These are the things I think about when it comes to making decisions about, who I dated when I was in high school, or what activities I participated in. And to have those people that walk alongside you, that's what we call discipleship. I would find somebody or a small group of people that are willing to actively walk with you in a discipling relationship. That is super important, and it's just kind of a lack that has existed for a long time in the church. We are good at getting people. We're pretty good at getting people saved. We just don't know what to do after that. And I think that's the next step. What do you think, man?
Yeah, no, I agree. Of course, you're an athlete, right? So you've done that, and I'm sure a lot of your peers are. Of course, you have other people who are not necessarily athletes, but maybe musicians or whatever. How do you get better at those things?
You continue to work at them.
Continue to work at it, right? And I think that's a big piece that a lot of times we, as the church, and I'm talking a big church collectively, not like Ridgecrest, but like as the church as a whole, to Michael's point, where we've struggled is we've done a really good job at getting people to make professions of faith, but then we don't have any coaches, right? We kind of miss that piece that you need in your life of having that coach that comes alongside you. With baseball, you're practicing several times a week. You got games, tournaments, all these things that you're getting ready for. We as a church have been very weak in this area of getting people surrounded by the right coaches to help spur you on and develop some of those habits and things, because that's what our faith is we have our part. Of course, the Holy Spirit's going to work in our lives and take care of what he needs to. However, we have our role in that, and that's putting in the work, putting in the practice, putting in the effort to want to get better. As you've seen probably in sports, Maverick's kind of at this phase of his life right now where he's young enough to where I'm not necessarily making him choose, okay, well, you need to do this sport or that sport or whatever, but he's at that phase of life where he's either going to continue to get better and kind of pursue athletics more and more, or he's not going to not care about it enough to where he's not going to put in the work, and he's going to get passed by all those other kids that will. And so he's kind of figuring that out right now, and he's starting to put in the work in the areas, and I'm starting to see that more of where he's giving certain things more attention because he realizes he wants to put in the work there. So I think our faith is the same way of recognizing that our faith in Christ is the most important thing, and we're willing to put in that work, and that's getting those coaches, as Michael said, the discipleship piece in our life. That's us putting in the work. And then we mentioned, in sports, you're practicing, you're getting ready for a game, right? We got to get in the game. We got to, find areas to serve, and, locally, nationally, and internationally. And, and I think when you have all those pieces that we see in everything else that we do well in our community, and just bring those into our faith, with wanting it and wanting to work hard at it, us doing our part, surrounding ourselves with coaches that are going to help us get better, and then finding ways to get in the game and pursue those things, then I think that sets us up for the best success in our faith.
All right. So, on one of your last sermon series, took about 9 weeks to finish one sermon.
Yep. It's true.
One of the topics that you kept on saying the word perseverance.
Yeah.
And how it's very important to have that in your faith. And so a follow-up to the last question is kind of for the other group. What are the best ways to continue to grow if you've been a believer for a longer time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually think it's going to be similar to the answer to my first question, to move from I am being discipled to I am discipling. Like, to take on that role of coach is the way I think about it. Like, if we go back to the athletics example, I've always loved being in athletics in some way, shape, or form. I was never a good enough athlete to play a lot of times in a lot of the upper levels of sports. We make fun of me all the time at home about the fact that the highest level of baseball I ever played was on the green team in 6th grade. And I didn't swing the bat maybe 2 times that season. I was hoping for a walk. And if somebody threw it over the plate, I was striking out. So, but what's been interesting is I moved, once the boys really took baseball as like, this is the sport I want to play, I moved into the role of like learning as much as I possibly could about the sport so that I could help teach. And I took on the role of coaching at that point. And I've learned a lot about baseball. I feel like I was a pretty good coach at times. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that like I just took seriously, this is something I want to be good at. And then I tried to teach others. And I think that's the next step for somebody who's been a believer for a long time. It's not just, I need to keep reading my Bible, I need to keep praying, I need to keep serving. It's, I need to find somebody that I can teach to do all these things so that they can do it with somebody else later on. And so that'd be the next step for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And what does teaching something force you to do?
Be prepared.
Be prepared.
Yeah, you got to be ready.
It forces you to know that subject matter very well, because now you're having to teach it in a way that someone who may not know or may not understand whatever concept it is you're teaching, and you have to be able to know it well enough to translate it to language they understand. And so I think, I agree completely.
Yeah.
Great question.
All right, so I got the next few that I have is they actually came in from other people.
Okay.
So I asked a few people, and they came in. So, and it's not necessarily questions that they deal with. It's just like I asked them, like, what do you think a lot of people deal with? And so with we have a lot of distractions in today's world now, obviously. So at our age, I feel like one of the leading problems is like temptation and lust to do different things, especially like right now at like the 10th grade mark for me. That's whenever people start to change and choose where like the path kind of. And so how can we avoid that temptation and lust and get it out of our lives?
Yeah.
So I would say you can't avoid it.
Yep. That was gonna be my first thought too.
Yep. And so it's figuring out how to face it head on and lean on the Holy Spirit to help lead you and guide you in those decisions. Because to your point, it exists, right? And a lot of times I think in like specifically student ministry and students, high school, you kind of feel as though it's just there, right? Because you're right, that you got hormones going every which way, your body's changing, all these things that you're trying to figure out how to navigate and how to do all those kinds of things. But, it's happened to all of us. We all face it. We all face those different challenges. But again, it's not the temptation or trying to do avoiding that aspect of it. It's figuring out how to identify it and recognize what steps you need to take to persevere, or stand up against it. And so I think, the way I would say I kind of approach it is first and foremost, identify it, because going back to our spiritual growth aspect of it, the more we're in the Word, the more we're devoting ourselves to things of the Spirit, the easier it is to identify those areas and identify those areas of weakness. Second aspect of it that I personally do is put up safeguards, right? Where I identify the issue that I know that this is a biblical issue that, is not pleasing to God and not pleasing, to, His Spirit and those things. And so I've identified it. Now I got to figure out how to, avoid it or prevent myself from taking that path. So I put up some guardrails, right? Just like, anything that, whether it's people, whether it's protections on your phone, whether it's accountability, all those kinds of things that I know I can kind of protect myself around. And so I put those up, and then I develop a plan of knowing how to not breach those patterns that I put in place. And again, that's not to say that I'm perfect in that, right? In all these areas and all areas of our spiritual life, there's times when, you'll brush up against those guardrails, and they're there to try to keep you in place. And then, there's other times you crash through that guardrail, and that's where we now come to a place of repentance and, seeking God's forgiveness in that area. And now us turning our attention to say, well, I'm not going to identify myself in that way. I'm going to identify myself with Christ, which means I'm going to pursue His way next time, and I'm going to kind of continue to work and figure out. And maybe maybe this guardrail wasn't good enough guardrail. Maybe I need to put something else in place. Maybe I need a different person that's going to hold me accountable. Maybe I need whatever. Because everybody deals with whether it be lust, any temptation that we face. Everybody deals with that differently, and it makes it difficult, to kind of walk through that, because sometimes I'm like, I don't know how to help you, because in my mind I'm like, I just don't do it, right? But that's not going to work for everyone as far as those things. We all have those different things. We know Jesus was tempted, and how did Jesus refute those things? He battled it with Scripture, and he didn't avoid it. He was tempted, but he stood firm against those things. Yeah. And so that's kind of what I would say. You can't avoid it. You got to put practices in place to help protect yourself. Know that there are others that have went through it, and finding the right people that have went through it that can speak wisdom into those specific areas that you're facing temptation to kind of help you navigate and kind of mitigate the risk there, I think.
Yeah, I'm not going to add too much other than the last thing that you brought up, and it's going to sound like I'm saying the same old thing over and over and over again. I think it's because this is just an area that God has made really clear to me. You need to have people in your life that you can be honest with, and that you can say, I'm struggling with this. I need you to pray. I need you to be a person that I can tell that I'm struggling right now. I need you to be the person that, like, when the temptation hits, I'm going to send you a text message. I'm going to make a phone call so that you will know this is a moment where I need your help. And I think that's one of the things that I probably lacked when I was younger. That would have been really helpful to me. And you have to, the other part is you have to be disciplined in that. You have to be willing to say, every time I feel tempted in this direction, every time I feel like I'm going to, potentially fall in this way, I'm going to send this text message no matter what. Because this person's going to receive me without judgment, but with grace and mercy and a reminder of this is what the gospel says about you. And then the other thing, like, I think programs are helpful. I would say that programs are not going to be effective until you decide that you value your relationship with Jesus over every other thing that the world offers. And when you get to that point where it's like, I do value this more than this momentary pleasure, this a way to avoid, stress or cope or whatever, like, this is better. Jesus is better. When you get to that point, all of a sudden it just becomes so much easier to say no to the things that are ultimately going to make you miserable, frustrate you, slow your spiritual growth. And so I would say have people that you can reach out to, will hold you accountable, will love you regardless of the situation, will remind you of the truth, and then also just remember that truth that Jesus is better than anything the world can offer.
Yeah. All right, so I did throw in a couple fun questions.
All right.
So we can take a small break from the serious ones.
All right.
Probably fit 2 fun ones in there real quick. The first one, college football. Who's your national champion this year? 7 weeks through. I can start if you want me to.
Go for it.
Okay, so I was looking at.
Are we going to give multiple?
I'm going to look at the AP poll real quick just to remind myself.
That's what I was just going to do.
You can give multiple options, but I would say I'm very high on Indiana right now.
Okay.
I like their coach and how he coaches. I don't think that they're going to win it. I think that they're going to have a situation where they make it very far and then they fall to a good team, a really good team in like the semifinals probably. I think that's going to be their trajectory because I feel like we've seen it before. But I don't know. It's hard because it feels like not a lot of people are very like there's not like one outstanding team this year, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree with that. And
I would say, I don't know, if I would have to give 3, Ohio State probably. I feel like they're just one of the top 3. Miami looks really good. And I don't want to put Alabama in there.
Then don't.
But they're looking really good right now.
They're going to get another loss here pretty soon.
I don't know. It feels like one of the blue bloods in like the SEC is going to somehow find a way to
rise up,
come away with it, I feel like.
Okay, so I'm sitting here looking at the AP poll, and on my app it has like their differentials. So if you were to look at the top 12 and look at the differentials for the top 12, number 1 for differential with a 6-0 record is Texas Tech.
Now Texas Tech is
they have a differential of 35.3.
They have a good chance, I feel like.
Number 2 is Indiana at 33.5, and number 3 is Ohio State at 30. I don't know if I believe in any of those teams as far as actual national championship contenders. Because, like, there's something to we've been here before, we've done this before.
I feel like it's going to come down to experience.
Yeah, and, like, the teams that kind of show up in there, I mean, I hate to say it, but, like, Alabama's one of those teams, Georgia, Oregon even. I mean, there's a couple of other SEC schools that are kind of in the mix as far as, like, I mean, I think Texas A&M's got a great shot. Tennessee's got a good shot. I don't know what the rest of their schedule looks like. Matt probably does.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, if Tennessee wins throughout the regular season, they got a real shot because they've still got to play.
Yeah.
They got Alabama coming up this week, as of the point of a recording here, third Saturday in October. So that's coming up. So that'll be a good game for both of those teams. They've still got Missouri. They still got Oklahoma. And they still got Florida and Vanderbilt and some of those teams. But yeah, no, I think if Tennessee is able to, I don't know if they will, but if they were to win out, they'll be a top 5 team.
Yeah.
And so they've got a shot. I don't know that that'll occur or not. But yeah, so the way I kind of look at it is by default, my first place I look is last year. Mm-hmm. And, we're starting to get middle of the season, starting to kind of figure some things out, see what teams are. And, as we always say, that preseason AP poll is always garbage. Now it's starting. They
shouldn't do rankings until about week 6.
Yeah. Now you're starting to kind of figure these teams out. So I say all that to say Ohio State, they've been there. They've done that.
I just don't believe in their quarterback right now. I don't know.
You're right. But.
Yeah, but I feel like there's like a lot of teams who are young and really entertaining, and they're pulling off upsets right now, but I feel like they're not going to be able to keep it going for the entire year whenever it comes down to against Ohio State in the semifinals.
That's right. And so I think you've got to at least consider them, and until they prove me otherwise, I've got to at least say they're probably what I would say my favorite, because they won it last year. They got the experience. They're undefeated at this point this year. Now, I don't know that they really played anybody.
Yeah, I think
they haven't played anybody really good yet.
I think that they returned like almost all of their players.
That's right, and so you had that piece. Your Texas Techs and Indiana's, well, I think they're ones that are going to have that kind of, lack of a better term, Cinderella season.
Yeah,
I don't see them doing much in the playoff. Could be wrong, but I don't see them being able to do something like that, because to your point, I think it does come down to some experience, and so they might sneak out a win or two here, but I could see them struggling once you got kind of deep in that playoff, especially this year, because it's a brand new playoff format. The rankings and now the seeding is going to be different, all those kinds of things. So I think that's good there. As much as I would love to pick Tennessee, I don't see them as a national championship team. I see them as a playoff team, but I don't see them as a national champion. Alabama, they are starting to look good right now, but they've still got a lot of games to go. They got Tennessee, they've got Auburn, which, who knows? That it doesn't matter what year it is. Alabama and Auburn game is always close.
I think they play that game at Auburn too.
Yeah, it is. They still got LSU.
LSU's not any good,
and
they're not.
I think Missouri should have beat Alabama this past weekend.
You said what?
Missouri should have beat Alabama this past week.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's the thing about the SEC. That's why, used to this conversation, it'd be Alabama or Georgia, right? Like, we'd know it was going to be an SEC national champion. It's not that way anymore. Like, there's more parity with the whole NIL stuff. You're starting to see that spread out a little bit. So I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. But right now, I would probably say, as much as I hate to, Ohio State's would be my favorite.
Yeah, but I remember I was watching the game. Alabama had like a 3rd and 15, very first drive of the game, and then an unnecessary roughness call on the defense. And so that's the first down. They scored. Missouri's quarterback was leaving everything high. It was rough.
Yeah.
But
now, I can't be the host without bringing up. Neither one of y'all brought up Ole Miss.
No, they're not. They're not
real
contenders.
They're not real.
Listen,
I mean, they probably are. It makes me angry.
I think that the reason that the Washington State game was close was because they have a tendency to overlook the easier games.
They do.
They had Georgia.
Yep.
They usually lose the trap games the week
Yep.
before. They did win.
Yep.
I still think that they're going to come up short.
We'll see.
I think
You
they
know.
lack. They probably will make the playoff this year. I think they lack
will.
the experience they need. Kiffin tends to overcoach in important situations, and they don't have a quarterback that has the experience. Like Jackson, last year should have been the year for them.
I don't think that a D2 quarterback who won a national championship can immediately come into an SEC school and win a national championship there.
Yeah.
Just because of like the sheer difference.
It's different,
of it all.
for sure.
But this is my question with a little bit of strategy involved, and I'll explain it. If you had the chance, where would you want to travel to on a fully paid 2-week vacation? So it's all expenses paid. I feel like the hard part is that you have to go somewhere that you could go for 2 weeks and still find enough stuff to do and like not get bored of it.
So does it have to be like one location?
Can you branch out to other places from that one location?
Lorelai was talking to me about it last night. She said that she wanted to like do like a backpacking trip, like cross country Eurasia.
Yep. Okay.
I feel like that would be allowed.
Okay.
That is allowed.
Okay.
I feel like it would be allowed.
Okay. All right. Do you have an idea?
It's tough. I've been to a lot of places, and so, some trips I have done is I did a 2-week trip to Europe and literally went to all throughout Europe, and that was great. Going through there, there's places that you could always spend more time and say like you could do 2 weeks in Italy, and do something like that. But there's places I haven't been, like Russia. I think there's a lot of neat things to see there.
I don't know if Kelly feels the same way about your Russia.
Is it because of the fear of war, or just because I don't care about Russia?
All of the above.
Okay.
You just sound scared.
Here's a place where in the future I would say pull it up to look at a picture, because there's some pretty cool places in Russia.
And I believe you. I probably need more research, but just
Probably.
first here, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
Russia.
I would probably choose like an Italy or Greece.
Yeah, which are great.
Something like that, I feel like.
Yep.
Goodness. There's a lot of really cool places in the world. I would want to go somewhere where there's good food. Because if I'm getting all expenses paid, I'm going to hit some good restaurants, some good food. I'd want to go somewhere where there's some things I haven't seen before, and that it would be difficult to go and see, just kind of naturally. So I am actually tempted to say I'd love to go out to the American West and like hit a bunch of places out there, like hit the Grand Canyon, hit some places in California, up in the Pacific Northwest, because I know that I'm going to get good food. I know that I'm not going to have to necessarily adjust to the fact that like I don't speak the same language as everybody who's there, which is an adjustment. I mean, I remember the first time I ever went out of the country and had to figure out how to manage a situation where we flew into Mexico City and nobody spoke English, and we had to find our gate for our plane and the restrooms and everything else, and nobody could really help us because we were like the only English speakers around, and that was kind of disorienting. So that said, I mean, I obviously would love to visit. I think I probably would do like a 2-week UK visit, and like hit Ireland, hit Scotland, hit other parts of England that I haven't been to. The food's not. It's okay. It's there is good food, but it's not. I would not go there for the restaurants, for the food. But there are so many things there that I'd love to see, and you could easily spend 2 weeks there and get a lot. My wife would choose Hawaii. She definitely would. I've got to take her there at some point. I think she's going to be upset with me if I don't.
So I think all those are great, but I've changed my answer as I've kind of thought and processed it a little bit.
Where are you going?
So so that it's all expense paid, right?
I mean, whenever I
So-
talk about all expense, like you don't have to pay a singular penny.
Yeah. So see, that's what, as I've kind of thought and processed, I'm like, all these things are great. But like I said, I've been to most of these places,
Yep.
and I've saved up, went, and so I got to pick something that I can't, right? That I would need someone to all expense paid.
Mm-hmm.
So I am going to the International Space Station. Go with like, go with Elon Musk's, his like, what's it called?
I don't remember.
They do like the
SpaceX or
SpaceX.
something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going SpaceX to the International Space Station, hanging out there for 2 weeks. Because what's better than going to space?
You could like go
The food's not very
to
good.
planets, I guess. I don't know.
Food is one thing you have to kind of say, well, I'm not going to be able to do that, but like. Yeah, so I'm going
I
2
don't
weeks.
You're gonna have
I
incredible
mean,
views.
2 weeks,
I
all
mean-
expense paid to the International Space Station.
The absolute dread of space for me, though, like if something happens to the International Space Station and I'm stranded in space, nope. If I'm stranded at the Grand Canyon, I'm cool with that. Like, it's at least I know I'm going to live and not die if the space station explodes. Whatever. But
Fair enough, but yeah, I'm willing to take that risk.
that's fair.
Okay. All right. Well, we can.
We're head back to serious questions
Yeah,
now.
we can change.
Where would you do you said Greece,
Probably
Italy,
Greece,
kind of
Italy, around those countries, and if not, I'd probably do like a backpacking of not backpack, but like
travel,
jump around
yeah,
to like Finland, Norway.
yeah.
Oh, hit the Scandinavian
Yeah,
countries. I
that'd be
like
cool
it.
too.
That's
yeah.
probably one thing
cold.
I would do. All right, let me find.
Why don't we do 2 more serious questions,
Okay.
and then we can do one more fun one to
fun
end
one.
up. But,
All right,
okay.
perfect. I'd say that this is a question. It's more common for everybody.
Okay.
I feel, y'all both have probably heard this question countless number of times. How can a good and loving God allow so much suffering at times?
Yeah,
Great question.
it is a good question. Probably one that deserves its own podcast. I had a whole class on this in seminary, and there is a bunch of different answers to this question. At least possible answers to this question. And they range from we're just creatures. We shouldn't ask that question of the Creator. I don't think that's necessarily the way the Bible presents it to us. The Bible presents God as open to our questions. I don't think the book of Job answers this question. I think the book of Job deals with suffering and our response to suffering, but I don't think it necessarily is an answer to the question of why God allows it. Because at the end, God doesn't answer why he allowed it other than to say, I'm God, you're not, trust me. And so like I would say that I don't know exactly why certain things happen, like specific things. I know generally that God has allowed evil to come in the world because he gave us freedom. He gave us the ability to choose to follow or not follow him. And the result of not following him has resulted in all kinds of evil he ultimately is not responsible for. He made us free, and we are responsible for those things. Because the only way we could actually truly love him is to freely choose him. So I think that's the kind of philosophical answer to the question. I would say his answer to suffering is classically answered in the fact that Jesus suffered for us and with us. And so while we may not understand the why of everything, we do know that God understands our suffering because Jesus Christ came and suffered with us, and he has answered that suffering on the cross and dealt with sin, dealt with death, and one day is going to make all things right in his return. And so there is an answer to suffering, but not necessarily an answer for why exactly certain things happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd add anything to it. You know, like this. There's, to your point, there's a lot of things we could say and talk through, but that would definitely put us over time on what people would want to.
It's a great question, and it's one that a lot of people, I would say, use to not believe.
To not believe, yeah, I would say that.
And I always point to C.S. Lewis because it was that problem of evil, problem of suffering, all those kinds of that led him to Christ. Yeah. And so, to your point, there's a lot of things we could kind of talk through. But
the way he explains it, so he has a book called The Problem of Pain. And at the beginning of the book, he basically explains, like, this problem is the one that led me to understand that, like, okay, if I actually believe there is such a thing as evil, then there has to be such a thing as good. And how do we determine what is good, what is evil? We have to have a lawgiver or somebody that sets the standard for us. God is the only answer as far as that goes. Like, he can be the only one that can answer that question. And the way he puts it is, if I grew up in a universe where everybody was blind, how would we understand the concept of, I think the way he puts it is the concept of color. If you tried to explain color to somebody who was blind, born blind, they wouldn't know. It's obvious that there's somewhere deep down in us that we know there's a difference between good and evil. And so for us to point to that and say that's evil requires that there is a standard, a law that has been given to us. And the only one that can give us the law is somebody who is omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent. That's God. So anyways, yeah, that's a good shout right there to bring up Lewis.
All right. So one of our main slogan as a church is to know God, love others, serve others.
Yep.
Serve others, reach our world.
Attaboy.
And so what are the best ways, like, for teenagers, new believers, like, or just older believers, but still teenagers, like, what are the best ways as, like, a busy one to serve and reach others about God in today's world?
Great question. There's a bunch of different answers to this. One, get involved in the church in places where you can, and then where you're not sure, ask. So you are involved in AV. You serve on the leadership team for our student ministry. I would say, like, just find places to serve the church. There are statistics that are really clear. The people who stay after, so, like, there are all these statistics out there that, students, when they go to college, they leave. People blame the colleges and say it's because the colleges are liberal and they're teaching them all these things that are anti-God and all that stuff. That's not really what's happening in most cases. What's happening is those students were never involved in the church where they saw themselves as a part of a greater whole. And because they were not involved in that way, they ultimately saw themselves disconnected. So when they leave the church, they don't see themselves connected to any church anymore because their church was the youth group. And one of the things that Jeremy's done a good job, we've done a good job generally, is we try to let the students be involved in every aspect of the church. You've served in the Christmas programs, you've served on AV.
I was the elf.
You were the elf.
I was the elf.
And you rocked the elf. I mean, let's be honest.
That is one way you could put it, I believe.
So, but, like, because those things are true, the statistics say that because you've served, you're much more likely to stay in the church after you leave for college. And it's not just because you take your faith seriously. I think there's a lot of people who take their faith seriously, but they leave the church when they go to college because they just don't understand how they're connected to the local church. Service is kind of the key thing. What do you think? I mean, is there anything you want to add as far as serving goes? I got ideas about reaching. But.
Yeah, I think find any way to get involved as possible, and kind of use it as a time to experiment with your skills, passions, and all those kinds of things. Because, serving in kids and preschool ministry, a lot of times we think, oh, we're just putting a warm body in there, the teenager, just to kind of help. But no, I mean, those kids look up to teenagers as superheroes, right? And they're like, man, this I can look up to this person. If they see that, person in there, even though you may not have all the answers, you may not have that. Essentially, you're stepping into that coaching role that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. And you may be an assistant coach or a position coach in that sense, but those kids see you as that person. They're like, man, I can't wait for Micah to be back or whatever. And then same thing in AV and these other areas, that now adults start seeing, like, oh, well, you got a 16 year old kid doing this, then maybe I should be doing something. And you're setting an example, and all those kinds of things. And so yeah, I think finding any and everywhere to serve in the church and find where those passions are, because once you find them and you kind of get connected, then those are going to easily translate. Okay, well, now when I move away to college, I know I can find a local church and I can jump in and plug in this area, because this is what I discovered I really enjoyed and really found fulfillment in kind of how God has created me with certain gifts to use them.
Yeah. As far as reaching goes, it's this is true of every believer. God has put you in a particular place to build relationships with the people around you, and those relationships are your avenue for sharing. And it may not always be like that. Every time you have a conversation with somebody, you share the gospel. It may be as simple as they tell you about their life, and you're like, I'm going to pray about that for you, if that's okay. And you are consistently and faithfully taking care of people, allowing your faith to influence that relationship. And what's going to happen is they're going to ask you questions about your faith naturally. And so I would say, like, you live with integrity. You live with you just allowing that faith to influence every part of your relationships. And there are going to be times where you just get the chance to share the gospel, where it's just like, I'm going to tell you about Jesus. And this is, y'all have trained in this in student ministry. We've talked about it as a church, sharing the gospel in a couple of minutes. Y'all have some bracelets now that y'all can wear to school that has the gospel story on it. And all you got to do is walk through that. Like, you're going to have a chance to do that, but I think it's going to be the more consistent living with integrity, allowing faith to influence every part of your life, that is going to open the doors for gospel conversations. Yeah.
I would probably say, like, if I had to answer the question, one of the, my favorite things is FCA at, schools. I'm happy to say that Germantown, we're growing right now at a rapid rate. It's been kind of crazy because, this year, it's like 4 of us who are over it. It's my friends Maggie, Temple Hayes, and me. And last year, we had, I don't know, it was a little bit weird. Like, we had some weeks where people they forgot to plan stuff, and so we just couldn't have it. There was not a lot of people there. And this year, we've been doing all the same things, but we have not had enough seats for a month in a row, and people have had to stand. And so our goal by the end of the year is to have one in the gym, because we used to do that a while ago, and then the rate just dropped, and so we've not been able to do it because we would take up not a lot of the gym. But it's grown at a rapid rate, and Madison Central, they all do all theirs in the gym. I know that, and other schools. So I would say just find a way to help in that, probably. Yeah, and that'll just lead you to a lot of different things.
Yeah, for sure. That's great.
All right, one more question.
All right,
it's a fun one.
Okay.
So to start out, I don't know how long I'm going to play baseball, but what was your highest level of athletics?
Athletics?
Yeah, how far did you make it?
So I would say 8th grade. Was my last year, and I was a swimmer. Could have went further, should have went further, but got mad at a coaching change and quit. And so,
yeah, for me, ninth grade track. 9th grade track.
Not basketball?
No, I didn't. I was a manager in 9th grade, and I got to practice with the team, but I wasn't good enough to make the high school team.
9th grade track.
So 9th grade track was a miler.
So we're about to flip it.
Okay.
So we're talking about, you're basically reaching GOAT status. All right, you're going to be on the Mount Rushmore, top 4 of any sport that you pick. If you had the chance to be on the Mount Rushmore of any sport, what sport would you play?
Are you going to answer this question too?
Yes.
Okay. I think when I was growing up, I would have said basketball without doubt. I would have been I want to be in the same echelon as Jordan and that group. And I think I have changed in that, because I understand so much better how hard it is, I think it would be baseball. One, because it's America's pastime. And I have grown to appreciate and love the pace of baseball. I love the strategy of baseball. Like when you start to get into it, like there's way more strategy than you think.
Yeah.
When you're just watching, a lot of people just think you pitch the ball, you hit the ball, you play defense. Those are all true, but there's a lot going on at a coaching level that I've learned a lot about, and that has made me appreciate the game so much more. And it is literally the hardest thing in baseball to hit a fastball. It is the hardest thing in all of sports.
I still don't understand it.
Yep. Like it requires such a level of hand-eye coordination and skill that you see guys who are incredible athletes in their sport, basketball players, football players, and you put them on a baseball field and they look ridiculous. You put them in a cage hitting off a tee and they can't do it.
Giannis.
Yeah, Giannis
hitting off a tee, and he just completely missed the ball. Just hit the tee, knocked it over.
You're talking about a guy that's going to be an NBA Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
And you'll put baseball players out on a basketball court or on a football field, and they can do it. Like, obviously, there are probably guys at every level that can do it. That was one of the things that was most impressive about Jordan, the fact that he quit
or like Bo
playing
Jackson,
in the NBA.
He went professional in 3 different sports or something like that.
Deion Sanders. Anyways. So, yeah, it would be baseball, and I think I would want to be, the greatest closer of all time.
You would choose closing pitcher?
Yeah. Just to know that the pressure of everything is on me and I can hold up to that pressure and be the greatest of all time at this, that'd be me.
Do you want to go first?
Sure. Hockey, without a doubt.
Okay.
Not surprised by that.
Because
Nashville Predator fan.
I am, because I still am a firm believer that I believe hockey players are your greatest athlete all around. Because of endurance, being able to skate, being able to skate at high speed, all those kinds of things.
The skill level
agility,
you need.
a lot of skill
level. You have to do
level
it for a long time.
And that's right.
I can't skate for about 5 seconds and
so
I fall over.
And the thing about hockey is, of course, you have line changes, so you're constantly changing and stuff. But what you're doing in that is literally you're out there at a sprint the entire time you're out there.
Yep.
Then you make your line change. You basically get about a 2-minute break. You're out there for your next line again, a sprint again, and so I've always just, I enjoy hockey and I enjoy playing it. I've never been anywhere, good enough to play it on, as far as an organized team or anything like that. I've done some rec league stuff, but beyond that, of course, you didn't really have it here or where I grew up. You didn't have school teams or anything like that. But yeah, I think hockey players are tremendous athletes, and to be able to be at a high level, Mount Rushmore of that kind of skill level, I think takes it. And then I would I like the because you specifically mentioned a position. I'd be torn on which position in hockey that I would want to be the greatest at. Goalie is pretty cool. And essentially your goalie is your catcher, and there's a lot of catchers that's where they've gotten their background is, they've been hockey players and they've been hockey goalies, and they play catcher and stuff. So you have things like that. But yeah, so I think a hockey player for sure.
I was thinking about this last night, and I'm not going to choose baseball. If I chose baseball, some people are going to think I'm crazy because my favorite team is the Braves by far. Mm-hmm. I would want to play for the Red Sox or the Yankees. One of the two rivals. I really like the rivalry, and there's something about cold October baseball that I really enjoy.
Yeah, sure.
I would rather be playing baseball in 50, 60 degree weather than 80 degrees
outside,
weather in October in the ALCS or something like that. And I think I would choose football.
Okay.
I think I would choose football. I would want to play defense, probably linebacker or safety. One of the two. I don't know. I've been on a football high lately, and sometimes I wish that I never quit. I feel like I could have been pretty good if I learned more about it and got better. But I would probably choose football, And then again, I would want to play in a colder place because I enjoy, like I always see like some of the snow games.
Oh yeah.
I feel like it'd be a lot of fun to just like wreak some havoc on a snow game and just like go crazy on a snow game. But I would probably choose football if I had to choose again because there's something about a really good defense that I would choose a stellar defense over a exciting offense for me. I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. Well, very good, Micah. Thank you for
absolutely
coming in and
for having me.
Absolutely. Hopefully, as we kind of went through some of these questions and began answering, again, some fun ones, some deeper ones. There may be other ones, and so we encourage you, hopefully that some of these are helpful to you, or if you know someone that might be helpful to as well, share this information. We'd love for you to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, we'd love for you to like there and follow us there and share that information, just so that way other people can get to see this podcast and recognize that we're here and that we are here to answer these questions, talk to everyone who walks through these life journeys, so that we can pass on that information and always remember that there are better things ahead.